the agenda, Jeff?
Sure. So we sent out an agenda. At first was a tentative agenda, and then we kind of crowdsourced everything that people thought might need to be talked about. Some things on a more urgent timeline than others, but at least we have a record of what we all think is on our plate, and we can work through it as we get into the summer. I sent out the bidding schedule because we've got some ongoing meetings tied to summer and fall programming that are obviously moving targets because of everything going on in the state with the pandemic response. And I think it would be important if there's anything that we can lock into that we do that so that there's just less moving pieces. And obviously the bid schedule has something to do with that. So that latest calendar is up there. We can, after this meeting, we can update that if there's any changes in the timing we want out there for bids. The lower security enhancements, that design and the early childhood modifications for the C1 pod, that's scheduled right now to be bid out on May 12th. There's been a lot of discussion about, under the pandemic situation, that obviously we're doing this for our preschool space need, and now all of a sudden we don't know if people are going to register for preschool and the numbers that we thought they were going to. We don't know how the summer is going to play out, and we don't know if we open up programs because we're allowed to return to normal if the students and participants will return back as normal. There might be young kids who families hold out of preschool programs because of concern about their health. There could be financial impacts on families who wanted to do preschool and other things, and they're living in a different world and they're delaying their mortgage payments, and all of a sudden that forgiveness goes away and they have to make decisions about things. So it's really very uncertain when it comes to that. And the short-term need was that preschool space. So I just want to start out by strongly recommending that we continue to move forward with the lower entrance at the high school, security modifications in whatever fashion is approved, but to continue forward with that, to continue to make it ready for preschool, and that we have some alternate plans for how to best use that space temporarily the first year if we don't have the preschool registrations. I still think it's the best intermediate term investment that the district can make, not only in the preschool programming, but if the high school ever needs to use that space again, it'll be because we were strong in preschool programming and growth caught up and they'll need to adapt that space. And I think it's their quality improvements either way. So my suggestion would be that we move forward now and lock into doing those adaptations, those improvements that were connected to the preschool moving to C1 pod and to the high school for next fall, even if something happens with the registrations and that doesn't turn out exactly the first year as the way that we had planned. And then because of growing special education needs, and we know early childhood special education needs, we know that we're going to have to service those kids, whether the families bring them to a program or not, through Child Find and through ECSC and all the other things that are connected with young kids and providing special needs servicing. Even if they don't want to bring their kids to school, we're still going to have an obligation to provide service. So we have to find space for growing ECSC needs. And we've been working on that. And what we've told people is after this facilities committee meeting, maybe we can lock into some things so that they're just off the table for discussion. And then we can start making the best decisions we can about all those other needs. And everybody right now is living in plan A, plan B, and sometimes even plan C. And plan C is, we're just not going to offer something. It's not mandatory. We're not going to have the registrations. It's not going to be a revenue producer for the district. And so we're just going to sit it out this summer or fall and not offer that program. And that's pretty rare, but these are strange times. So C is out there. Otherwise, everybody is already looking at the summer as plan A is kids can come in, and plan B is it's some type of distance learning or modified way of spacing kids out, social distancing, whatever. So everybody's working on plan A and B right now. But we hate to throw in one more variable, which is, well, maybe we'll do the high school project and maybe we don't. And so that's why I'd like to hopefully get that decided one way or another so that we can proceed with that. Everything else on the list is just collecting everything that we've heard from everybody, everything from water pooling in the parking lot at Todd Field to where do we leave off on middle school auditorium toilets, and you know, how far did the discussion get on that external retaining wall, how that's degrading over at the high school. So just everything's on there as a collecting point, and I'll leave it to the committee to work their way through, and we'll take this video and make a report out of it and set up for the next step. So that's really my big part of this meeting, is setting the stage, and I'll turn it back over.
Okay, so I guess we can start by just saying, you know, are there any questions on the updated bid calendar that was sent out? Otherwise, we can move right on to what I imagine is the biggest discussion point, and that would be the preschool and high school.
Bid calendar for me is fine.
Okay. All right, well then let's talk about the preschool and high school. And so I think my first question, Jeff, based on kind of your summary there, and for Mike, is that if we go through these projects and we continue moving forward with them and the preschool does not move there this year, what would be your ideas for that space for this first year?
Go ahead, Mike.
I can speak to that. Thanks. It's great to see everybody. And
It's great to see your shirt.
yeah, we had a staff meeting and we just said it's Tropical Friday. It was fun to see 99 people in some form of floral. We're having a little fun. The security entrance, that is a great upgrade, and that will continue whether there's preschool here or not. The restrooms, the conversion to full privacy, staff love it. It's a great idea. That'll continue. The piece with sinks, I don't know if early childhood or preschool were to leave, there would really need to be a specialty program that would need sinks. But I also understand that's part of the plan. So I don't know if there's an intermediary for a year. We do have portable sinks in other areas of our building, if that would be the case or not. But if we were to go through all those various areas of construction, I still have teaching to do. And I have 6 staff members that are teaching English, special services, and social studies, and they would continue in that area. I also know that there's our STARS program, which is our 18 through 21 program in special services. And Dave Haveman and I have talked about, in order to ease some crowding at Tilden, that we could certainly help absorb up to 3 classrooms if early childhood or preschool did not come here. So that space will get used regardless.
And maybe Carrie, do you want to jump in on the possibility that if preschool does not go over, that maybe ABE might be able to use one of those spaces to free up space at Tilden? With the latest thought on that?
Yeah, I'll tell you that we have 2 options that we're looking at right now for Tilden. If we all have to stay at Tilden, it puts us in a real pinch. And so the 2 options on the table, and none of them are great, but we have to do what we have to do. The first one is to move ABE to that one classroom that Mike suggested out of Tilden and into the high school. And just a reminder, when we were first talking about this, we talked about how the high school is a challenging space for students that are trying to attain their GED, just because, you know, if they were not successful in the high school, it might not be a positive space for learning for them. So that was plan A. Plan B, if I think all 3 of you board members were here at Tilden in October, and we looked at that motor room. That's a very big classroom. And then we're hearing information from, I think, the CDC saying that next year we might want to consider not having shared lunch spaces for staff, like our lunchroom at Tilden. So plan B is to move the motor room into the lunchroom, which is a smaller space, and we'd have to condense some of that equipment. But again, that motor room is a large space and could be used for the second ECSE classroom.
Yeah, I would agree with Carrie about moving ABE back to the high school. I'm not a fan of that like she had mentioned, that these are students who did not finish high school in the traditional way, and whether that was for academic reasons or emotional reasons. And I think for many kids, going back to that space could really hamper their ability and to kind of achieve the GED, and that may not be the best space for those kids. I mean, like she said, there's not really a ideal answer here. Lisa?
Thanks, Kelsey. I want to state unequivocally, I would like to go forward with the construction project. And I'm not concerned if we put some money into sinks and they don't turn out being sinks, quite honestly, that get used heavily. It's been a very uncomfortable situation to be so far behind this question in terms of actual available options in our district, and I don't want to lose this opportunity to be ahead of the discussion. That being said, I sort of have two real concern points. One, I want to feel comfortable that the team, and the team in this case is probably Dave Haveman, Mike Johnson, Carrie Gore, and whoever they feel like needs to be in the mix, and Cam possibly, having regular ongoing conversations about space usage district-wide, and whether that includes additional leasing or whatever. So I want to feel comfortable to know that that's continuing to happen, and that will continue to happen to a long-term solution someday, down the road. And then secondly, I want to caution board members that we don't want to be managing this problem. I want to be governing this problem. And I think governance is commitment of resources, and it's not this classroom goes there and this classroom goes there, and then we do this other thing with this other thing. I think we got to find, as a board, a comfortable place where we're governing and making the resource commitment, and then letting our administrative leaders make the operational decisions.
I would go along with that. I think that, in many ways, there are needs to have a facilities committee and looking at the big picture, but I don't think that the board should be in the position of making direct setups or saying, well, this classroom is here or that project is here. That's what we have administration for, and as long as we have confidence in the administration that we bring on board, we just do the big picture item and let the administration follow through to make sure that it's correct.
Dave, can I ask you how you feel about continuing forward with the resource commitment at the high school on this particular project? How do you feel about that?
I think that we have to. I think that, we're at a point where even though it's social distancing and, people are getting more comfortable, I'm probably as guilty as the next person out visiting, maybe visiting more than I should and talking to folks. And, folks are concerned. Essentially, I'm hearing a lot of parents concerned about, what's the school going to do? How come we're not having prom? What are we going to do for, graduation? But we're really at a point where, I think that as far as the project goes over at the high school, we just follow through and commit to do that complete project, with the alterations, the bathroom change when we get to that discussion, but also just the for the preschool area in that pod. If it turns out that we don't facilitate the sink setup right away because there's not the numbers, so be it. We just work around that.
Right. So then I think we're all in agreement with we move forward with the project as we identified it. And then if preschool doesn't move in, we find a use for that space in the meantime. Mike?
Thank you. The student entrance, that's security solution. At the student entrance, there's a different solution for preschool for the door just outside. I guess I'm looking to Kyle and Scott. Isn't that correct? That we have more of a, not a construction, but kind of a low voltage camera situation at that outside entrance, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And the new secure entrance, I think, would handle all traffic when it's not the beginning or the end of the early childhood day. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Lisa?
I appreciate that clarification, Mike. And when I say supporting the entire project, it means both the beginning and end of early childhood day security entrance. And I also think we need to move forward with the scope of the rest of the security entrances, bathrooms, and that whole piece.
So just to get everybody synced up, we're talking door number 21 and the reader on that door that goes forward with the whole project. Okay. And then one of the attachments that has been shared with you and a few updates, there were 3 options for how to do that lower entrance security vestibule that have been enhanced. And then Mike, and where we left it in our last meeting was Wold would work with Mike Johnson and really talking about how it's actually going to operate, how it would be staffed, how it would effectively provide security. And so I know Mike and Kyle doctored up one of those options yesterday, and I hopefully sent that to everybody too. It's got some red markings on it just to even be more specific. So maybe Kyle and Scott and Mike can talk about those options, because if we're going to move forward, then we want to determine how we're going to bid out that security vestibule and make a final decision on that.
Yeah, and actually I have an updated version if you guys don't mind me sharing my screen here. I think the red marks that I had, that was on the attachment you maybe received on option 3 were kind of a sketch as Mike and I were going back and forth about how he sees this operating. So this option 1 on the first page was, I think, just the initial diagram that we showed, and I think both Jeff and Mike had some thoughts on the location maybe not being the best for visibility of everybody coming in. So we met on site with Mike and kind of walked through, taking a second here, basically an option with the screening station on the north side of the vestibule. And there's kind of an existing window between the first and second floor that we would modify into a transaction window on the main level and kind of make an additional security vestibule on that set of doors. And then I guess as we were leaving, we had another thought that we connected back with Mike over email, and that's what option 3 was. And I guess maybe Mike, if you want to talk about which one you prefer, but in the interest of making sure we move forward with this, I think just a kind of decision or direction on, I think, option 2 or option 3. The difference between the redlined one and this diagram is the security station and the little vestibule there actually have dimensions that'll work for people to navigate. The other one was just kind of rough sketches. So
Thanks, Kyle. And I really appreciate Wold. Well, I've worked with Wold for a long time, but just coming down and listening, putting different ideas. So again, Kyle and Scott, thank you very much. The part that I think was driving some of the let's look at this was visibility, to be able to see the actual people as they walk up. We know that we're going to have some cameras also. So where you see on Kyle's screen security station, that what that whole point is to try and utilize that window that's there so the person can still see out. And we're probably looking at a standing height, or I guess maybe, like, lack of a better term, a bar stool kind of height, where someone is raised up so they're able to work with people that are in that vestibule, but then be able to see still out to the existing vestibule through that window. The part that this allows is that vestibule becomes quite a bit larger. So if we do have some people that are coming and going, it just is a little bit bigger to be able to do that. It seems like you're walking into more of an office setting. So that's something that we really liked, and that L-shaped counter was to give us that visibility of looking out. The part that, looking for some feedback is this visible enough to someone that's walking up to the school, maybe for the first or second time? So Kyle, could you please go up to option 2? And option 2 is the person is still working in the same area, and now we have a lockable window, and that person is always looking out that window. And you can see the secure vestibule is a little bit smaller. The existing vestibule would still be locked, mind you, and people just couldn't get in. But I think on this one, you have a small vestibule, but it's more visible for people that are walking in. In either case, we have a staff member that will learn how to operate all of our doors. There'll be working cameras. That'll be helpful. And we'll be able to make this work. But I guess that's the piece. I appreciate Wold adjusting this. Hey, let's look at visibility first. And then it's really, as a board and superintendent, what do you see as being the best one to give notice that, hey, wait a minute, we can sign all we want, and maybe that's what we need, or maybe that vestibule stepping in is what we're looking for too. But either one, I think, are great for us.
From an operations perspective, Mike, when I look at the security station being entirely separate from the modified staff office, does that change your staffing or the functionality? I think the visibility is challenging either way, quite honestly, because this is inside, it's under that big overhang.
Sure.
And I put this in the notes, and I think Scott said this many, many times, which is people will drive to the flagpole and they consider that the front of the building. So maybe we need to move the flagpole as a small portion of our communication. But I don't know that any one thing is more visible than the other. I look at that separate security station and I consider that might not be the most staff efficient.
Well, Scott moving the flagpole, that's a lot of years of experience. That's actually a great idea. The modified staff office, this is 1C. And currently, the staff offices were built when we were building a high school for 2,000 students, and teachers would not have their own room. So now that we're under 1,500, approaching 1,400, even less than that, the staff offices really is a secondary spot for staff members to be. So we have a few teachers only that are using this for storage, or they're using it for a lunch area. And also this is 1C. So now you would have 6 teachers down in that 1C cluster going someplace else. And so they wouldn't be needing this area. And you would also have lunch space built into the preschool area for staff, so that is a more secure entrance. So that's an explanation of saying this will not impact anything. In fact, it is some empty space that can be utilized better. Okay.
Thanks for that clarification, because I wasn't sure if this was a functioning office space, but it's basically just empty space, and it's low use space. Correct. And who's ever in that security station is already separate from their coworkers, whether it's on the right or the left-hand side of the vestibule.
Sure, and Kyle and I just trading emails is, do you really even need those walls for that security station? If there's the big wall and the window that's going to separate your visitors from that area. I think Kyle's point is you only have really one economic opportunity to do it at the best cost savings to be able to provide an office setting. Just do it right the first time, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, looking at it, I'd probably lean towards this option that's on the screen now, option 2. While I agree with Lisa that I think there may be visibility issues regardless, I think maybe this one is a little bit less so than the other option we had looked at, that this may be a little easier for people.
I'll go along with option 2. I think this is a much better idea. I really didn't care for the updated option 3 there, but I'm also concerned about, you know, the visibility point, but the knowledge point of, okay, yeah, maybe Lisa's idea about moving the flagpole is really a smart idea, because, you know, people drive to the flagpole and say that's the entrance. I mean, look what we did when we were over touring at Edina and Shakopee a couple years ago. And I can't remember if either one of you went along, but as we drove in, we looked for where the flagpole was at and went into that entrance. So I agree that that's maybe a smart idea to change where that flagpole stands.
One additional consideration here is if you have your people who are arriving in a chair or in a wheelchair or motorized personal chair, that straight line goes right through the secure vestibule, and that's where your door actuators are. So someone does not have to take a right to go into the vestibule, then take a left, then go out an additional door. It's just a straight line of sight.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And then in our chat, there was discussion, but I think that should just be said in the meeting as well, that there wasn't a significant cost difference between the two options. They were looking at them being about the same.
And I guess I would go along with the idea that, okay, the security office station there, you know, do it right and put the walls up instead of just having a corner. I think that, you know, do that now at the same time when the construction is going on. I don't believe it's a smart idea to just have a corner in a larger room to use as the security station.
Right, so Lisa, I guess Dave and I are kind of on option 2. Would you also agree with that and move forward with that as our recommendation? And then we can keep knocking off agenda items here.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with option 2. I appreciate that they're about the same level of cost. I think as it gets final bid out, if the sense is that the vestibule should be a little bit bigger, which is the thing that's lost with not going to option 3, and look at alternatives for that. And I would concur with Dave that securing a corner of that office as an actual security station now is most appropriate in the event. That just leaves us an option of actually using the rest of that modified staff office for other things in the future without infringing on the security station. So I think that just should be involved right now. And I'm not taking any credit on the flagpole thing. I sat in many a meeting where Scott McQueen has said, you cannot get parents to drive past the flagpole and park and wait for their kid. They will stop at the flagpole regardless of how many staff you put up there. And I just want to demonstrate to him that I do hear him speak.
Okay.
Thank you for remembering.
I just wanted to ask really
Oh.
quick, Kyle, do we have to put fresh air in that security station if has walls?
Yeah, I think we would just tweak how the distribution is happening in that office to make sure they got fresh air and, you know, temperature control in there.
Probably even do that in the secure vestibule. So
Yeah.
there's a little ductwork, but we can probably borrow from the adjacent cluster to do it. So.
Yep.
Okay.
So I hear a lot of momentum building up on this flagpole idea, and it may be possible to leave the flagpole on the top entrance and just not put a flag on it and put the flag on a new display down at the lower entrance, but either way, I guess, just remember to come back to it because it's not a part of any plan right now. So as you get back to your list and finalizing where the bond dollars go, you may want to make sure that that ends up on there.
We can look into that, Jeff, and get more than likely it'd be starting new with a new flagpole because the concrete work is tough to chip off the bottom of a flagpole in most cases, but sometimes it's sleeved and it can be done easy. So we'll look into it for you.
But to everybody's point, I think people are looking for the flag and not the mast. So if it's an empty, mast, and there's a flag flying somewhere else, I think that probably gets to what everybody is looking for, and then gives you an option always for the future.
Okay. I think that sounds good. So then, if we move on down, it would be the Hastings High School upper entrance operations and possible safety improvements. So has there been more discussion about kind of how we would work this if we only had the lower entrance secured, what the plan would be for up top? Anything?
I think on our end, I have not heard that we would do any improvements there. We certainly would have to do some signage. We would continue to have a greeter, a teacher on their duty before school and into part of that first hour, just to make sure if people were coming in that they would know where to go. It's similar to our athletic entrance. We keep open until 8 o'clock. School starts at 7:50, but so we just would have some people there just for that part of it, and then we'd have to sign it.
Okay. So then we can talk about estimates for restroom improvements and locker room privacy enhancements. At our last facilities meeting, we talked about if we could come up with a design that would kind of blend the privacy with the supervision aspect, and were we able to kind of come up with some ideas on that, discussions? What are we thinking?
Yeah, I can maybe start out and I guess just share another plan here. So this view on the left here is, I guess you can see both, is a typical kind of end result. I think on the right is how the current wall and door into the toilet is set up now. In talking with Mike again on site, his view, I guess, of that, and Mike, feel free to add, was just for that to be open entirely. So as staff are supervising from the hallway, they can see if anyone is hanging out, kind of mingling in the wash area is kind of a typical gathering point for people just hanging out and kind of creating maybe a hostile point or environment. And in that plan, envisioned that all the doors to the stalls be no different than any other full door, goes all the way up to the top of the frame, and all the walls go down to the ground, and the doors would go down to the floor as well. Where I think we maybe still have some discussion to understand how this is going to work for the school is as far as how the maintenance staff needs it to be kind of closed off or indicated that a bathroom's closed, whether it's after hours and only certain restrooms are being used for events, or on the weekends, kind of a similar situation. But again, if they're full doors, all the stall doors could lock. If that restroom is locked at the time, and we talked about potential options ranging from something that would add cost, like maybe rebuilding that wall as glass with a glass door so you can see in, but it's still able to be shut down, or maybe something more just keeping that openness and some way of indicating, maybe it's just a tape that gets pulled across the entry if it's being cleaned or closed or what have you. So.
Kyle, thank you for drawing that one up. This to me, we've talked about this a few times here with different iterations of it, or different boards actually over the years. To me, this provides the ability for a staff member not to have that creepy feeling of going into a bathroom, but they can stand outside in the cluster area. There are students that know which bathrooms in our school where there's always a staff member there for safety reasons, or just that uncomfortable feeling. So that really helps us out. I think secondary is that students would not vape there. They would vape someplace else. But again, I think it's a student safety issue. Kyle, I would assume that these walls and doors then go all the way up to the ceiling, correct, for full privacy?
Correct.
Thank you.
So what would be the cost of removing the wall?
Maybe Scott, you can jump in if you have any other thoughts, but if I think we budgeted per pair of toilets $190,000, and some of that is contingency to handle the unforeseen stuff when we're just looking at a initial plan like this. But the amount of work that it would take to just demo that and kind of modify the ceiling and floor back, with the amount of floor work and ceiling work we're gonna have to do in the toilets anyway, is I guess not nothing, but not enough for us to move the needle on the estimate.
Okay.
If we were adding storefront, a bunch of glass, so it's completely separate but visible, we would certainly want to adjust the budget in that case, I think.
And so Cam, I know you had mentioned the concerns with cleaning and things like that. And so have your questions been answered? Do you still have concerns? What would you like to see?
Yes, it's certainly better to have a full door on each stall. That would certainly help, but it would still be a lot easier to manage for our staff if we had the ability to completely close off that area. And I don't know if there's any creative solutions for that or not, but I just think about cleaning and maintenance. If we have a major plumbing issue and we have to shut a restroom down for a week, some of our maintenance staff is here till 2:30, and we don't have somebody in that area after. So if we didn't have a good way to seal that restroom off so it couldn't get used, we would have to put up plywood across there. I'm just thinking about the long run when we do have to come back and do work on these, or even daily when we have to clean the areas. We pressure wash everything every single night and then suck the water off the floor. I'd just be concerned if it was completely open that we would have some kind of safety issue there.
So would you prefer to see it rebuilt with like glass?
It wouldn't matter to me either way if it was maybe a double door into that entrance or storefront, as long as there's a capability to close that area off.
I'd like to encourage Walden, Cam, to keep talking about alternatives. I wonder if it isn't
Lisa, you're froze up.
and I don't know if this addresses your question, Cam, but if you had or that could be intermittent, that you had
Lisa, you froze for a little bit
I
there.
know. I saw that. Your internet is unstable, so I'm gonna take my video off.
Okay.
I wonder if, because I think the appeal of open is pretty high, and I want to encourage Cam and Wald to keep looking for alternatives that do not include glassing that in. And I don't know if that's, we purchase a couple physical pull gates and put whatever hardware is needed to onto the sides, and that you put them up on restrooms that are closed, or if there's something permanently installed on a pillar. I'd like us, I feel like it's important to the extent practical to keep that open. If we can get there, and then look for some intermediate level of closure.
Now, I'm going to say something here, and it's kind of going to go to the age of how I've lived through life. But when I was young growing up, and even when we first came to Hastings, the school system here and up in North Dakota, they used security gates that actually closed off sections. And I'm wondering, would it not be smart to give us that openness, but also securing off the area by whatever the possibility is of putting in those, security gates? Either they drop down or they come from the side, whatever. And that way the area could be secured, but it still could be seen.
And security gates, I think, would fill the need. Those would be adequate for what we need for maintenance.
I like the idea of having us study it some more with Cam. I think we're in a situation here where there's not a lot of precedent, and there are some code things that apply. We always have to keep rooms able to be exited for fire, so the gate solutions are pretty much hard to do unless I have a door also. So I'd have to have a door and a gate. And we don't have a real wide throat there. So we just have to figure out what might be a balancing act here. But if we understand the concept of openness is prioritized, but we got to figure out a way to lock or to prohibit its use during cleaning and otherwise activities like that. It's probably an equipment solution, Cam, where you bring something to this location in an equipment format might be the solution. But I think there's more time to do brainstorming. We do need to go forward on the early childhood one, which won't be like this format, is my understanding. That will remain closed. And so we have some time to think about this, because I doubt that we're implementing it. Well, unless we say go today, we're not implementing it this summer.
Right.
So we got time.
Yep. So it sounds like we'll just keep tweaking and figure out how to meet all of these needs at the same time. So at our next facilities meeting, hopefully we can get another update on kind of the thought process behind this. So then the next would be the locker room privacy enhancements for the high school, and what the plan would be with those.
Sorry, I guess I could have just probably kept that up here. If I remember right, I think at the last meeting, I don't know if you guys had discussed with Mike at all about how you guys saw this locker room area shaking out, but I think all we've really done so far is we've shown two different layouts. This one here that I think you end up losing 2 showers in the men's and 2 showers in the women's FIED. We have another one that we're thinking costs a little less, and maybe costs a little more, but like I guess the layout of the showers is maybe a little more intuitive, but you end up losing 3 showers instead of just 2. So I think there's some discussion on the use during FIED, if it makes more sense to do 4 or 3 showers in each. And I guess all these stalls are sized similar to the middle school, where there's space to shower and change outside of the shower behind that door. I don't know, Scott, have we done options besides like the doors that are cut off at the top and bottom?
No, I would add, all we did is take the area that's kind of dedicated to showers today, and how do we relay it out, and how many, privacy showers could we generate? And we came up with a couple variations on that. The question we always have with this is, how many do you need to survive or to make it work for a functionality? And do we need to be more dramatic and more extensive in our renovation? And then you get into, affecting locker quantities and such. So it's kind of it's always a group hug moment where you just kind of go, well, this is what we think will work. And we go forward with, this quantity, so to speak, and try to, because I do think as we do these, they're going to increase in popularity over time. And we're going to be able to bring back showering, so to speak. Kids have not showered for almost 2 decades now. And
I think, Scott, one thing we've seen in the last probably 10 years is a resurgence in our human performance, formerly Phi-Ed. We do have a lot of students that shower, and they at times will go into our team locker rooms or even the community locker room at certain times.
Oh, yeah.
So just, I think
Good for you.
Right. So I think privacy is a big deal, and the number is a big deal. And I don't, that's like Lisa was saying, that's more of a governance decision than a management decision. I'm just kidding. But that we have students, and we don't necessarily want to lose, but we also want to provide that dignity and humanity of privacy.
I am super confident if I called MSBA and said, is the number of showers in the boys' Phi-Ed locker room governance or management, they are not going to give it to me to decide. That being said, I do think it's true that, at least on the boys' side, given my personal experiences, what my son says is it is very common. It's very common both as the athletic teams and as the Phi-Ed boys. And very common means probably more than 50% or about 50%. It is very common for kids to shower at school. So I think there probably is a lean towards more. Not necessarily to give, I'm not proposing giving up locker room space. I feel more comfortable working within what we already have for shower space, but slight precedence towards more, or bias towards more.
We've talked about shower usage. What would you say the locker room usage is, Mike? The locker usage specifically.
Well, we go back to the school was built for 2000. And so there are less required students taking it. We have more enrolled because of high interest in programming is good. I'm honestly, my management issue is trying to get students to use the lockers that they have. And we have students that leave everything out, and then a cell phone gets taken, and that's really kind of the bane of our existence there. If we're looking at the one on the left, we could give up some of those lockers. That's not a big area to lose.
Well, that gives us more playing field to figure out what, could we inch the quantity up a notch? If you've got a high showering, population, it'd be nice to get to a 0 loss of showers, right? To at least get to 6 and maybe even squeak out a 7th or something. And now you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think if we already have a high shower usage, and then I feel like once you make showers more private, you'll increase that usage. People will feel more comfortable showering. And so if we're already having a high usage, I'm a little nervous about cutting the number of showers down. And so if we can look at giving up some of the lockers, especially if Mike is not seeing that need there as much as the showers, that might be something to look at.
Couple quick comments, just having completed a PE locker room and team locker room remodeling project this fall. we dramatically reduced the number of shower heads by going from the large group shower areas to the individual stalls. But when we did that, we greatly increased the number of students actually using it. And, you know, I think you're going to see an increase in the use, but I don't think that reducing the number of shower heads is a big factor. What's the magic number? I don't know, but that's just the kind of the oxymoron that happens there with the amount of shower spaces actually available. That the use goes up when you make them more private. And then on the locker room, kind of the one of the frustrations of anybody managing the locker room space is that when you give them lockers, they don't use them very well. They leave stuff in there forever, or they never use them, or they make a mess of them. What kids more often are doing these days is they're coming into a team space or a Phi Ed space with a backpack or a gym bag, and they're setting it somewhere, and they've got all their stuff in it, and then they leave. So maybe more like shelving or cubbies or something is a better way for somebody to have their stuff out and just set it somewhere. And giving individuals lockers, that's kind of a throwback. I'm not really sure that that's a model that's too critical moving forward, is that everybody who uses a locker space has their own individual lockable locker.
Jeff, you're right on, and that's what our students have been doing. We have some crude carts that we said, students, if you want to bring them down to the gym floor and put them on that cart, and we have a lot of students that choose to do that. If we were to just make them a little nicer and more attractive, maybe there's more students that would bring them right down to the gym floor like they are now. Again, we have some crude carts, but yeah, we've looked at that. It's a good idea.
I guess looking out here, I would not be in favor of reducing any of the shower space that we have. My question, I guess, and maybe Mike, you already mentioned it and I just didn't catch it. What's the percentage of kiddos that are actually using the locker provided? I mean, are we at 50%, 70%? Or do we have a lot of kids that just come in and throw down their bag and go shower and open their bag when they're done and put on clothes and leave? Is that pretty common or what?
I would say it's common in the regular Phi Ed, which is human performance here. At any given hour, there's probably two classes of 35 to 38 students each. So if there's 70, there's probably 20 backpacks that are left on the floor, wallets, cell phones, the whole bit. I mean, it has just been difficult. And when we lock them and students need to go to the bathroom or pass, that becomes a tough issue too. But we've tried to reduce barriers. So for example, students can bring their own locks, that they can sign up for a locker if they want. We have the smaller ones, the cubbies, which I'm not sure the dimensions of them for Scott and Kyle, but the smaller ones students can keep overnight with a lock, and the larger half lockers are just for that class period. And there are some that are empty. So we have usage, we have students that could use more, and we have some that are choosing to bring their backpack down to the gym floor.
Thanks. I just want to just reemphasize that the number of showers should not go down.
Okay, so then we'll look for another update on this one at our next facilities meeting and see kind of what options we can come up with. So then is there any more comments or conversation on this? Otherwise, we're coming up to an hour here, so we'll see what we can continue discussing. Next up on the list is the middle school auditorium toilets, ADA versus additional privacy.
And I can pull up that plan here. I think last time we met, I think there was a decision to move forward with those. And I think some follow-up feedback from the middle school staff is that they don't feel that that is a place that I guess they don't feel like it's the right place. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn for them, but I think that's the feedback that we were hearing and that Jeff was hearing maybe from the middle school staff. So sorry, just let me get to the
Sorry,
plan.
that this wasn't the appropriate place for privacy stalls, that they would rather them be somewhere else?
Yeah, and I was trying to kind of get to the heart of it. I don't think the board was ever thinking that this is the one place we're going to do it and we feel like it's done. It just seemed like a good opportunity and it would maybe serve the community. I know we were discussing that it's probably not optimal place for students for additional privacy or gender neutral or however we want to term that. But
Kyle, I think one of the things coming from the middle school admin was, this is so far from the center of the action in the middle school that it's not their priority to put this type of setup down there. That would really be more of an after hours community benefit. But I don't think they were opposed to it. They just said if it was their preference, they'd have these improved restrooms closer to the center of student action during the day. And I guess they probably somehow got left out of some of the conversations of how it got to be determined that it would be at the auditorium area that this was all put in. And so I think they were just catching up and expressing their concerns and asking if when this actually gets down to crunch time that middle school admin can be back in the conversation to make sure that they not only get a chance to have input, but just to understand what the big picture is. I think they just kind of felt like they got left.
Jeff, I think you're accurate on that piece. And again, we were just presented with this challenge because these are the most outdated in terms of accessibility in the building, and that's why the inspector was saying, hey, there needs to be an investment. So we know we're at the final push for the project, and we need to tell our contractor what to do in these bathrooms because we really need to include some upgrades. And I think the input from the admin at the middle school is accurate in saying there's a more functional, better place for them to have additional privacy. So maybe we just need to divide the two topics, even though they seem like they could combine. Maybe there's a choice also, or an option to divide the two topics and say, down in the auditorium, we're going to get at least accessible under the current project. And then maybe we continue to study deploying of additional privacy improvements elsewhere in the building, just like we are at the high school. And maybe that's a middle ground that meets the time constraints, because we do need to say something to our contractors about what to do with the auditorium toilets. So that's some more context on this topic.
Thank you for that context, Scott. I think another component is because this came out of the community forum that assessed facility needs, and this is a space where the community very, very commonly interacts with the middle school. It is a priority to that community group, and that's another piece of why this particular part came forward. Help me understand or remind me about cost difference between doing an accessible versus an accessible private. Because I think we're already at a point, if I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Jen, but our middle school project is either at or likely a little bit over budget. Not surprising for a project of this size. I'm not shocked or dismayed by that. And maybe what this becomes is, if it's a similar, I don't know what order of magnitude similar is. If it's a similar cost, I would support a privacy accessible space, bathroom space by the auditorium, and then maintain or place on the priority list a pair of privacy restrooms in the middle school, and then separate that into a is there money remaining question. So if you can remind me of the cost difference, and then that's how, to piggyback on Scott, that's how I feel like we could move this forward, because I do think we have to move on these.
So we already, had the contractor price up what it's going to take to add accessibility. I think it was about $25,000. And our estimate for both the men's and women's restroom was, I think, $107,000 for the additional privacy, going above and beyond just tweaking some partitions for accessibility, basically. So that being said, we've issued the additional privacy design to the contractor, and they're working on pricing now. Unfortunately, I don't have that as that's going to be our best data point to really evaluate the cost difference. And at that point, is the time when we're going to have to make the decision to move forward with that option, or only add accessibility.
We may have that pricing next week, but
Yeah, and we
have it
can email
today.
that out as soon as we get it.
But the point is, it's not the same price whatsoever. I mean, additional privacy is a lot more extensive construction. It's walls, and it's a lot of tile is the biggest difference. It's a lot of tile work, and additional doors and hardware are all much more expensive than just your standard garden variety toilet partition. So
Yeah,
Say,
I
Jeff,
guess.
did
Oh.
anybody come up and say, out of the middle school staff, which bathrooms they would like to see changed, excluding the auditorium? The auditorium, to me, that's a big community point, and I think that we need to proceed with that, at least at the bare minimum. But has the staff said what set of bathrooms they would like to see done in the middle school?
I don't recall them specifically saying anywhere. They're talking about, around the cafeterias and the high traffic patterns in the center of the school, with the main entrance and the office area and stuff like that is, where they thought was the greater need. But once again, I really think it mostly came from just somehow not being a part of the conversations where this moved along, however that happened, and just wanting to get back in the loop. I think they're probably, when they know what's going on, I think they're going to be fine with it. And it's good for them to advocate for the privacy for the general student use restrooms, because that's the direction we're moving across the district. So I don't recall, unless somebody else does, them pinpointing a specific restroom other than the high traffic areas.
I do know a couple that Joe had mentioned he thought would be good places. So if you look on the plan right now, the southwest side of the academic wing, that girls' restroom, he was talking about that being a single use. I believe both of the pool locker rooms by the gymnasium and pool, he was talking about the men's and women's being single use. And then there's a small staff restroom on the northeast side. It'd be area G in our current project, between the two E's, in the northeast side of the building. Right now it's single use, but it doesn't have much for privacy. It doesn't have a lock or anything. And I believe he talked about a couple more, but I don't remember exactly what those are. But Joe would be a good one to talk to about that.
Yeah, I would agree with the other committee members in that, I mean, the community identified this as a need. And so I think it's important that we move forward with it. I also think that we anticipate that these more private bathrooms are something that everyone is going to be moving towards, and it would be better to go in there and do that now while we're already in there making improvements for ADA, rather than having to come back at some point. If we can talk to the middle school and see what their thoughts are for privacy, I think the point of, is this being done for students or community, is important. And in the case of the middle school, maybe it's for both. And so we have some for the community, and then we have we determine where the best spot for students is. If there are students who feel more comfortable using privacy bathrooms, the auditorium is pretty far out of the way for them to have to go to. So I think we look at that, and I would say that we still move forward with the auditorium bathrooms as we discussed.
I'll throw in another couple comments here, just from, once again, finishing a building project. Before we did the improvements, we had no private restrooms, and we were more frequently dealing with students that was a transgender issue or some other personal issue that people needed some privacy, or were not using the restrooms at school because they needed privacy, and we had nothing to offer them. Once the project was finished, there were various restrooms around the secondary school that were private options. It mattered a lot less where they were in the school, just the fact that we had them, because we couldn't provide anything other than nurse's office before, and that was kind of discriminatory, So the fact that we had them in the building and kids could go to them, even if they were on the opposite end of the building, created many new options for administration and staff to provide comfortable accommodations for students. So I think having them in the building is a great first step, and making them more and more location friendly is a good follow-up step. But without them at all, you're going to have staff dealing with some really difficult decisions, and also students going to the extremes of not even reporting that they don't use a restroom all day or are not comfortable or whatever. Those are the worst case scenarios, and they probably already are happening. So getting them somewhere is a great first step.
So just to clarify how we go forward, I understand that we have a estimate from the contractor on an accessible restroom, and that we will be receiving an estimate from the contractor on an accessible private restroom. I think I hear consensus around, well, maybe I don't, because Dave said even bare minimum, but I wonder if we have consensus about going forward with privacy, or if we're going to need to do a quick thumbs up, thumbs down poll once those cost estimates come in. And then that the second piece, I still feel like, is a separate conversation between our construction leads and our building administrators about what would be your second choice, much like we found the second place in the high school. I don't think it's multiple sites, honestly. I don't see it being that, but if we could get one site more centrally located, I'd be interested in continuing to work and put that on our what if list. But I don't want to delay the decision to provide the contractor something on this until I don't know when, unless we take it up at the work session.
I give the thumbs up with moving forward with the ADA, the private accessible bathroom. I mean, we'll see what the price comes in at, but Wold had kind of given an estimate that they were giving. And
I would agree with that. We need to move ahead.
Okay, that's good. Okay. So I hear agreement then amongst the facility committee that we'll move forward with an accessible private restroom, unless it's just kind of through the roof. On what through the roof is, $250,000 or more, 25% in excess of the Wold estimate, something like that. And that we should enter into a conversation. We, in this case, is probably Joe and Cam and Wold, on a second location in the middle school, get a cost estimate, and consider where that, in the future, consider where that belongs on our priority list.
Yep, I think that sounds good.
Just to clarify, then you guys just want Wold and I guess Cam to meet with Joe and anybody else with the staff to determine what his student school use location, should be, and just make it clear that, look, this is the decision at the auditorium wasn't that this is the only place in the building we're going to do this, and not that it's necessarily gender neutral. It's just added privacy for community use, because that's the feedback you guys are hearing. Is that
correct?
That's both for community use and to increase our ADA accessibility, given the the poor service in that particular restroom. I do think we got to be careful that we're not making a promise to Joe or anybody at the middle school at this time that there will be in this bond a modification. But I think it's fair to say we want to get information about it. We want to consider it, and we're going to figure out where it belongs on our priority list against the other
Okay.
excess items. That's my
Yep.
that's what I hear.
That's what
Yep,
I would
that's what I
say
hear
too.
as well. Yep. Okay, so we have a couple more things if we want to keep going. High school external retaining wall degradation.
I got some pictures on that. I don't know, Scott, do you want to discuss this or?
Well, we have a deterioration item, right? And you can all see the cosmetic stuff. We haven't done any destructive forensics to really understand how extensive things are. We've had a couple contractors come and look at it and those kind of things. So this was, evidenced itself a number of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, Mike, I don't know, but it got on a list a long time ago, and a ballpark estimate was attached to it, and that ended up being wrapped in all the projects of the referendum. So we have this kind of a low fix-it-up budget that we're carrying for this. And I don't, Kyle, maybe you can refresh me on what that number is, but as we pick it up as a real project and have contractors looked at it, it was clear that the budget is not probably commensurate to the current state of the wall. The damage has progressed over the 5 years, and actually there's speculation on what damage lurks behind. Is this whole concrete, this is a rock face concrete block, special color product, and as you start fixing it, what more falls apart. And so some of the pricing we've even looked at is to replace this whole stretch of the wall. It's a veneer, it's an added finish, so you can pull it off. It's still likely to be very structurally sound still, and you build it back up with some brick or other product. So we've looked at all those kinds of things. The challenge is that the order of magnitude is way beyond the original budget. So to execute this project really needs an infusion of contingency funds. And the bond does have contingency funds for these kinds of situations. But it's obviously beyond the purview of Wold or even the administration kind of to just round up to this degree. I think Kyle, do you have the numbers? But I think we were budgeting somewhere around the $9,000 range or 10,000. And
It was budgeted at $5,700.
no, 5,700, and we're in
I think that was going
prices
back
that.
to 2009.
Yeah, we've got pricing of some ideas for this that are more in the $50,000 range. So, and I don't remember if there's even higher ones. Kyle, do you have the numbers in front of you?
Well, I think so. The option that we got quoted out by two contractors, the low contractor was pricing $32,000 to basically replace the top two courses of block and pressure wash the whole face and repair all these spalled areas where the material's falling off. So that was $32,000, and then to add a metal cap to further protect this was another $5,500. So basically almost a little shy of $38,000 to how we were thinking to address it and get it done right. We did look at another option, like Scott said, of just rebuilding the whole thing in face brick instead of this rock face. And to rebuild the whole thing, we were getting an initial quote from a contractor at $50,000. So
yeah, so that started to look like a good deal if the partial repair was 40 or 38. So it's one of these things where it's a bigger animal than what everyone was looking at 5 years ago when this got on a list. And it's also at the point where the deterioration is, concerning and not, it doesn't look good, and it's kind of at your front door and all these kind of things. So it kind of feels like we should do the right thing and do the correct project. But it takes, more understanding of budget and scope. And so we're at that discovery point where we're learning these things, and we thought we'd push pause and say, we just can't do this project without getting the facilities committee of the board involved and understanding it, so we don't overstep our boundaries on scope and budgets.
Scott and Kyle, what would you say, okay, if the top two courses were removed and we sealed this with some kind of sealing, I don't know, whatever, to
Yep.
try and keep the water filtration from breaking down, how successful is this? Are we going to need to address this in 5 or 10 years, even no matter what we do? Or if we replace the whole wall, will that give us 20 years, and then somebody else will have to tear down the wall and redo it again? Is there a way that we can, whatever, make a permanent fix so that whatever comes along,
Sure.
we don't continually have to address this?
Yeah, Dave, I'll give you some of the things we would observe about it. First of all, concrete block and rock face block is a porous product. So I think we've all seen that and understand that. And so even the fact that sprinklers hit this wall, it takes on water. Wind-driven rain, it takes on water. Moisture coming off the deck above, it finds its way in the wall, and then it needs to dry out. So it goes through that cycle all the time. And when we're in a freeze thaw, which I think is probably what's doing this, is we get snow melt in the morning, or part of the day, and then it freezes come nighttime, and so we get this falling too. So there's a lot of factors with this product as an exterior, and it's a very common exterior product. So you see this. A clay product like a brick is water resistant. A brick wall is water resistant, the mortar isn't. So they tend to survive this kind of situation a touch better. So that's kind of one of the things in the plus column of using brick. A permanent solution, there is no such thing. Buildings and nature fight with each other throughout their lives, and nature sometimes wins if there's no repair. And so if I go back to this, and I would say also with block, spraying a sealer on it every 5 years is a good idea. And I don't think this has had that since its original sealer. So that's probably part of the reason we have an aggravated situation. I'm guessing the entirety of the high school all the way around probably hasn't had a sealer refresh. If it has, it's probably due for another one. UV sunlight breaks down those sealers, and they have a shelf life of 3 to 4 years, kind of thing. So that's a few things I'd add.
Okay, so
it
I
needs
guess
more money. It does need more money.
Yeah.
And it probably needs more research on the best use of that money.
Okay, so kind of on Dave's point, since the brick would be water resistant, but the mortar isn't, does that mean that when things become damaged, will the brick be cheaper to fix and do the repairs on, in 10 years when repairs need to be done?
Well, brick, usually what happens with brick is the mortar starts deteriorating. So you start seeing that sloughing out or popping out, or, and if we keep after that brick, then you do a tuck pointing job, and which we've done some of those around your building. So that is a cheaper repair. If it's left to go too long, it could look just like this. A brick wall you've seen them that look like this as well. And then the repair is about the same, right? Because it's a lot of labor, and it's a lot of manual labor with the same mason. So that's what I'd add, I guess.
All right, well, Lisa ended up just ducking out, but she said that she's leaning towards full replacement, which would be where I'm leaning towards too. So if you can kind of just get some information, like you said, on what would be the best replacement here. I think that would be good for the committee. Now that Lisa ducked out, I would be hesitant about kind of going forward about the other 2 agenda items. Some of that is just looking at the updated priority list, which I think we have a couple questions first regarding the bathrooms and locker rooms and things like that for next time, because that will impact the priorities, and the costs of those will. And then the last bit is the concern about parking lot drainage and contractor performance dispute.
So those last 2 things were late breaking things. One is just an issue that Dave brought to attention, so I wanted to get it on the list regarding how the surface is performing over at the new parking lot at Todd Field. And then Kyle had sent me that there is a dispute related to some installation work over at Todd Field that he wanted the committee to be aware of. And so those are there just to make sure we don't lose track of them. I don't know if Kyle or Dave want to comment on either one before this meeting's over, or let it go till next meeting.
Dave, is there something specific on the parking lot that we want to touch base on?
Well, I guess that was one of the things we left last fall once we saw that water migration there, and the old cistern, is capped off so that water can't dissipate. Do we have another option? I guess I'm just thinking that, if we just say, okay, that's good enough, that's, in my mind, not an acceptable situation. We need to come up with a way we can alleviate that water drainage on a more, if it takes a change in that corner to, change the way the water flow goes, at least part of it, so that we don't have standing water in there as bad as it is. I don't know, but I guess I don't think that that's an acceptable end of parking lot project moving forward.
There are, obviously we've talked about this a little bit, there are very limited options, and that's why we have basically an upgraded situation from what you had before. You had ponding before around this catch basin, you have ponding today around this catch basin. We couldn't even change the amount of water flowing to different parts of the site. We had to keep that all static. So is there an improvement we can do? There is one thing I'm certain we can do, and that is to maintain this catch basin and probably clean out the bottom of it, because the bottom is porous and the bottom does percolate, and we can't enlarge the bottom. We can't make it percolate more, but we can maintain it so it percolates at its historic performance, let's say. And that probably gets challenged every year by material and debris and leaves and whatnot. And so that's one thing I know that can be done. We have looked at technical options to change this situation, like a tank and then pump it out. We could put a tank in and then you could manually pump it out potentially. Right now the city the city during design was not receptive to any means of pumping out into the storm sewer. Does that mean we couldn't do it on Tuesday afternoon, put a temporary pump and just run a hose over there? I'm certain we could do that and beg for forgiveness from the city to deal with temporary ponding and improve the and pump out the catch basin to improve its percolation. We can take up the matter again with the city. We have not pestered them with an idea of a tank and a pump again. We talked about that with them during the design phase and it was not allowed. But could we do that today with them? Yes. The tank could not be, based on previous ruling with MnDOT, the tank cannot be near this, where this puddle is. The tank would have to be on your property, which is over probably in the grass area by the concessions, between the concessions and the bleachers. Dig a big hole, put a tank there, figure out a way to get a pump to draw the water from the pond over to a tank, and then how do you get it out of the tank? So we could pursue those and we'd be glad to do that. And it doesn't cost you time or anything like that. We would be glad to look at that. to try to move this to another level. But those kind of solutions aren't cheap either.
Yeah, I understand that. I was unsure. I thought the bottom of the catch basin was sealed.
No,
Well,
no,
it
there
is not
outlet
sealed?
pipes out of the side are sealed.
Both of
The
those.
bottom is open
Okay, well
and
then,
can remain open, but it probably doesn't look as open as it could, right?
right.
Like anything needs a little maintenance, and that's when there's a big puddle there, that's hard to do, right? So you probably need to pump it once, then get down in there and remove.
Clean it out.
Yep, and then repeat annually or something.
Thank you.
All right.
And I can, in
Kyle,
terms-
did you want to share anything about that?
Oh, the claim.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know that we needed like board action. We just wanted to
No.
update you guys on where this was at.
Yeah. Maybe just
I shared
should
that
we
with
hit the highlights.
so they could see it. So
Okay, so we've gotten this claim. We have a sub of a sub of a sub, right? It's Intermedia. And they're the guys who put the speakers and did the sound system improvement, and they're a trusted vendor of the districts. They're a sub to the electrical, who is Kilmer, and Kilmer is a sub to Morcon, who's kind of the general who built the buildings and such. And they're all a sub to Peterson, who is the contractor who you have a contract with. So claims need to come up through that channel. We've received the claim. It's really about their challenge they've had to hang the speaker on the light pole in the southeast corner of the field. And they have had a real trouble getting that part of their job done. The first challenge was that they couldn't go onto the field, and they hadn't planned to not go on the field. They had assumed they were going to go on the field to do it, but the timing was such that they weren't able to go on the brand new rug. And so then they had to incur some costs to do it from the highway side. And the first time they attempted it was a rainy day. They had to pick a day with MnDOT 3 weeks ahead, and by the time that day came, it was raining and such. So it really couldn't happen safely. Second time they attempted it, the lift that they brought to the dance didn't perform very well, and they were at risk. At 1 in the morning, when they were still trying to do this, they determined they couldn't get it all done by 5 in the morning when MnDOT was going to kick them off the highway. So they abandoned that halfway through, and now they're reloading for a future time to do it. Through all this, they've incurred this a number of costs, but the cost that they're claiming was unforeseen was the permits from MnDOT. And I don't know, what's their total claim, Kyle? I don't remember the number, but
it's $3,415. So that's,
and they've been good and working around your football schedule and those kinds of things, and not wanting to drive a truck on certain areas and all that kind of stuff. So they've been playing ball. This is in the category of means and methods, and it's usually on them to figure them out and put them in their pricing and execute. But being a favorite local vendor of yours, we thought we should have visibility to it. And we could maybe see our way to saying some of this is unforeseen, but certainly not all of them are unforeseen. Bringing a truck that doesn't do the job certainly isn't an unforeseen that I think would fall on the school district's obligation. So at the best case, you'd split these costs with them somehow, right? You'd pay for one of them and they'd pay for 2 of them or something. Or we tell them, sorry, you've had a lot of hard luck, but that kind of hard luck isn't our problem. I think it's kind of in that realm. And we want to at least make you aware that we're having those kind of debates with a local trusted vendor.
I guess, Scott, when they come with a lift that doesn't work, I don't buy that, but the rest of it I can understand.
Yeah, I agree with Dave.
Yeah, the truck one's a bridge too far, but maybe we could help them with the other two.
Correct.
Yeah.
So find a middle
Yeah.
ground is what we're saying. Let's look towards that. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I
That's-
think so.
That's the kind of flavor we were looking for, is to understand how you'd view it.
Yep.
We'll work with them and report back.
Okay, great.
Looks like Mike's raising his hand. Or
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, I can't see anyone now when we do the screen share, so.
Okay, this is Mike. Just to speak to this intermediate systems group, and I like how you approach that, Scott. This has been a group in town that has volunteered some, and they've also, if we've had an issue because they're local, they have been on the spot immediately, and we, in the past, have not incurred late fees or charges. So for the extent that you're saying, hey, we'll work with you, I think that is much appreciated, and it's also well stated. You got to get the right truck that's there, but Scott, thank you for bringing that up, because they've been good to our school district.
yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Mike. That's everything on our agenda for today. And so we'll get another Zoom meeting or another doodle poll out there or something and figure out when the facilities committee will meet next and get all that figured out.
We really appreciate you guys convening for this and keeping these projects, kind of collaborating with us on this, navigating ahead. So thank you.
All right. Well, otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day and hopefully it's a beautiful weekend. All right.
thanks,
Bye.
everybody.